Okay, everybody, welcome. This is Will Cook reporting from Mount Kisco, New York. I'm delighted to be on the air today with you. This is my first podcast, although it's not fancy, not a lot of microphones. You don't see a headset, so I might call it a Zoomcast. Either way, but I'm taking a leap of faith, and I'm trying something today that's taking me a little bit out of my comfort zone. And I'm starting, but I'm not starting perfect. And I want to be able to kind of give a gift to you, and you can see the rawness in what I bring to you today, and so we can both learn. Um, Today, I have one of my guests here, or my guest today, Scott St. John, lives out, I guess, I believe in California. Um, is a guy who's a dynamic being, and he's done a lot of things. He's a educator, entrepreneur, a coach, and he's done things at a high level. But what attracted me to Scott was his energy, and that he leads with his energy. And I'm always noticing how present people are. And with men, I want to make sure that men are present because there's not a lot of men that are present with their emotional states. And that's what this society needs. We need men who can lead from the inner to the outer. So so Scott, welcome. And give us a little tidbit. I did mention a little bit about you, but where do you want to go with that? How would you like to present
Um,
yourself?
yeah, well, first, Will, I really appreciate you having me come on, and for you to have me on as your first is an honor. I really appreciate that.
Cool.
Um, so yeah, I'm a serial entrepreneur, to the fact that, in college 31 years ago, I decided that I was ready to go, and for my senior year of college, I dropped out and actually ended up starting and helping with a educational company, go figure, and with my wife, who also dropped out. And we went on to help create a company called Imagine Tomorrow, where we taught children technology skills. And most importantly, we taught them critical thinking skills and how to use technology as a tool, not a toy. We expanded it through, New York City public schools, Washington, D.C. public schools, and then decided to take the route of entrepreneurship, what we kind of tagged as the mamapreneur. And we did that by licensing our program out to about 750 locations around the country, where we became the largest provider of computer education in the country at that time. Then we got the notoriety and recognition from the Discovery Channel, and we signed a deal with the Discovery Channel to be the first online delivery of education back in the day, like that. So it was a client server technology, but even before really the World Wide Web was really readily used. I retired from that company and decided I really wanted to take my passion, which I've then found back in that business of teaching and being an athletic and in athletics, most of my life, almost all my life. I decided I was going to. I got pushed actually to open up a gym. And we talk about being uncomfortable with the podcast, right? You're starting, but you're not starting perfect. And I think I commend that. When I decided to open up a gym, I opened one up in Denver, Colorado. I was living in Denver at the time, and everyone looked at me and they were like, "What are you doing opening a gym in Denver, Colorado, one of the fittest cities in America, with no background in fitness?"
Great.
And of course that was a scary moment for me, right? But I realized that I was creating something a little bit different, and my motto there was, I'm here to create, not compete. And with that, inside the gym, I had a motto of creating strong, confident people. And I was really fortunate because I was able to take my background of education and teaching children and kind of morphed it into teaching adults. And again, for me, it all starts between the ears. Your attitude is everything. So we created something special in our gyms in Denver. It was called Pearl Street Fitness. And we just really grew very quickly within Denver. We're asked to be on the TV all the time, so we're on news channels all the time because we brought this level of certainty to people, right? We brought people through a process, and we called it Pearl Street Fitness, not because Pearl Street Fitness is well known in Denver and, of course, Boulder, Colorado, for those of you who know Boulder. Um, we called it Pearl Street Fitness because we looked at all of our clients as individual gems, right? So, how is it that you make a pearl? a pearl is made through intense pressure, right? Right? Intense pressure, and every pearl is a unique gem, right? Just like every client is a unique person. So we really thought that, and then we brought in street because we were a small boutique gym, so we were a local community gym. So we really wanted to bring the idea of creating gems in a community kind of base format. And it just, like I said, it took off like wildfire, and it kind of led us into our company that we actually have still running now, which is called Strong Confident Living. And we kind of wanted to take the aspect of the gym and bring it into more full circle, full on living lifestyle community, right? Where we really believed in three things: fitness, nutrition, and mindset, right? Move your body, how do you eat, and then of course, how do you talk to yourself? My wife is a renowned mindset coach, and she's been able to create some amazingly powerful yet simplistic philosophies and approaches to help people what we call get unstuck. So yeah, I mean it's been 31 years now almost of trials and errors and successes and failures. But it's been an amazing process, and I've been very fortunate. Well, now we live out in California, and I've been very fortunate to find myself in very unique places, kind of leading me to the idea of being like, wow, I don't understand how I got here. So I grew up in Vermont, in a very small town outside of Brattleboro, Vermont. For those people who know southern Vermont, in a town called Guilford. We had 720 people in our town. There was no red lights in Guilford. There was just stop signs and cows. But we did have Brattleboro, which was right next door, which was the big town of probably 10,000 people. But so, again, I came from a very humble background, but I was, brought up to believe. And that's really what I've brought with me the whole way. That's what I try to teach people as I work with them. And, I believe that people can do amazing things when they get out of their own way.
I love that. They can do amazing things when they get out of their own way. So that really brings me to this next question or this next mindset thing is people a lot of times will figure out they'll watch YouTube, they'll watch different podcasts to get information about how to be successful. And sometimes they'll get caught up in the fluff of it and they'll get really good at watching these things and acquiring knowledge. But there's sometimes a hesitation with taking action. And you seem to be a man of action. So, what allows you to remain fierce in the face of fear and to act? What allows you to do things without hesitation?
I mean, I think that goes back to just, I think more of my upbringing than anything, kind of seeing a family that always did everything themselves, right? We're really entrepreneurial in their own right. My grandfather was a bigwig for IBM back in the day. He had three boys, just like I actually have three boys now. And then the birth of his third son, they were living in Hartford, Connecticut at the time, in a really beautiful community, nice house. And my grandmother gave birth to their final boy, and he came into the delivery room after, back then, husbands weren't allowed in the delivery room. He comes into the delivery room and he's told my grandmother, I quit my job and bought a farm in Vermont, and we're going to raise men. So they packed up, moved up to Vermont, became pretty much dirt poor farmers back in the day, but really created an amazing an increasing work ethics in my now father and uncles, and started a whole entrepreneurship with them, where they then opened up hardware stores, bought bunches of land, did all kinds of stuff. And I kind of saw that as this kind of like attitude of like, you can pretty much do whatever you set your mind to, right? And then of course, and so, we might talk about this, but I'll bring it up now. I had
I know
my
what you're going to bring up.
grandfather.
Yep.
Yeah, I had my grandfather, who was a
Yep.
huge and part of my life growing up. And when I was really young, one day I was complaining that I couldn't do something, and I was just whining to him, and he stopped me in my tracks. He pointed his finger down at me, and he's like, Scott, don't ever use the word can't. It's not in the St. John dictionary. And I mean, it literally hit me like a brick. And I just remember that feeling, being like, all right, I'm never going to say the word can't again. And then I found a lot of my hesitation coming from, or my lack of hesitation coming from athletics and really extreme sports.
Mm.
I've always been a big skier and a big mountain biker. And I kind of took that skiing and mountain biking to the edge as much as I could whenever I could. And I realized, if I was going to do the skiing and the mountain biking that I wanted to, I couldn't hesitate, because if I hesitated, I was going to be in trouble.
Yes.
I was going to find myself getting hurt. And that kind of led me into a lot of different things. And again, back to another moment in my childhood where my parents told me, and it was actually, I was asking them about church, because we didn't go to church as a kid. And I knew my family had when they were younger. And they just had, disagreements with the church, and they're like, "Oh, we're not going to do that. But if I'm going to tell you one thing right now, if you want to believe in something, believe in yourself."
Yes.
And again, that was another one of those moments where I was like, "Whoa, okay." So here I am being told when I was really young, this is below 10 years old, if I'm going to believe in something, believe in myself. I don't have the word can't. It's not in the St. John dictionary. And then literally throughout high school, I just kept pushing that limit, doing different things. My mom was also a big proponent of that. She really pushed me outside my limits at the time too, being like, you need to go, you need to, you need to do something more than don't just settle here. And that kind of also pushed me through. I mean, I graduated high school on a Friday night. I moved out Saturday morning, and I've never lived at home again.
That's interesting. Yeah,
So
that's really interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And
that took me. So I moved to Maine for the summer, where I lived above a restaurant it kind of reminded me of Dirty Dancing, that setting of the
yeah,
country club. Like I was a assistant golf pro at the golf shop that summer before I went on to college. And then I
right.
went to college in Connecticut, and again, I never lived back home.
Mhm.
But yeah, when it comes to hesitation, I always found that, you know, you, you got to be willing to fail, right? You got to be willing to fail. You got to be willing to take risks, and you got to be willing to do exactly what you're doing right now, which is start, even though it's not going to be perfect that you think. And who knows, right? It might be perfect,
Right.
right? And that's the beauty of it. You talk about people absorbing information, right? And especially these days, we have all the information we want right at our fingertips, 24/7. You name it, you can find it, you can
Right.
create it, you can do it right now,
Right.
right? But again, so many people are nothing but consumers, right? They consume, they consume, they consume, but they're
Mhm.
they're they're frightful about doing anything. I tell people all the time, put the goddamn book down and just go, right? You're never going to be ready.
Mhm.
I'm not ready to do this. I'm not ready to do that. Well, again, we can come up with every excuse in the
Yeah.
book to not be ready. But the thing is, you just go, you fail forward, right? You got to take the first step, which is to actually take the first
Mhm.
step. And
Yeah.
it's so funny how people get so crippled by one. I think they don't want to be judged, right? A lot of people don't or feel like they're judged a lot. And again, other people's opinions of you is not your responsibility, right?
Mm.
It's whatever. I tell people all the time, I'm like, you're gonna love me or you're gonna hate me, but you're gonna know who I am. And either way, I really don't care. Like, I hope we can have a great conversation. I hope we can connect. But if we don't, I get it. Okay, no problem. Right? I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. Right? We're not here to be people pleasers.
Right.
We're here to be ourselves. And I think being yourself, I mean, that plays harder than it sounds for a lot of people. And when I see those people, and I'm really, after coaching and working with so many people for so many years, I feel like I'm really able to read into where people are holding themselves back. And you just see it all the time. And I always tell people, I'm just like, you know what? It's okay. Like, it's okay for you to be you, right? And the more you be you, the more you find it to be easier to do everything in life,
Right.
right? And when you stop pretending to be someone else or pretending to do something to please someone else, everything changes, right?
Yeah.
It's part of it, what I would call your flip my life moment.
There's a courage in that. And I want to expand a little bit about what you were saying about hesitation and but also your extreme sports example. Alex Hanold from Free Solo, the guy who did Taipei
Yeah,
101, the skyscraper
yeah,
recently.
yeah,
They had looked at his brain and his amygdala, and he was in a MRI. And they showed him these images, and they said his amygdala wasn't lighting up, and something said it must have been a brain defect. And I find that highly irritating, and I think it's also disrespectful to Alex, and I'll explain why. and I'll also relate it back to your fearlessness, or maybe you're binding your fear and working with it appropriately. Has been climbing since he was 10 years old, and he's done 5 climbs a week for 30 years, right? Free solo climbs, rope climbs, big hills, small hills, cliffs, all different kinds of things. So he faces fear a lot of time, and so he takes more to arouse him, but he also has learned to use the fear to his advantage to even actually stay safe. So I think with extreme sports, like in the situation you're talking about, is again, if you hesitate, you could go over the handlebars or you could get hurt doing whatever it is that you're doing. So you learn that fear is not a stop. Fear is a continuation as you continue to just move through. But you can evaluate in fear. It doesn't mean that you hesitate, but it means like it's like you're thinking while on the fly in the middle of this performance, and you have the ability to do both because you've used to being fear there. You're not trying to push fear in the background. You're using fear in a way that works for you. So I think that in terms of you is, I don't know if that extreme sports became before you were an entrepreneur or
It
during,
did.
but
It did.
it probably served you
Sure.
when you went to make decisions in the unknown areas of your life.
Yeah, like dropping out of college, right? Like, I was, for me, fear brings focus. That's
Yes.
how I look at it, right? Because you can, when you use the fear to focus, which what I've always done,
Mhm.
because yeah, like I get fearful for sure, like if you don't, are you even alive?
Right.
But even back to Alex though, yeah, they saw that, that his brain doesn't fire in that way, which helps him, kind of push the boundaries a little bit, right? But at the same time, like you said, he's put himself in those situations. And I actually just saw an interview come through the other day on social media with him talking about, what's actually more dangerous. It's these people who, sit around and don't do anything all day long and
Right.
have heart disease and this disease and that disease. He's like, they're setting themselves up more for failure than I am.
Mhm.
He's like, because I'm actually in control of what I'm doing for the
Yes.
most part,
Good
right?
point.
He's like, I'm in
Yep.
control of this. He's
Yes.
like, so, and I was like, wow, I'm like, that is such a great point because so many people are victims, right? So many people
Yes.
are victims of
Yes.
circumstances because they're not taking the control.
100%.
And just like
Mhm.
with fear, you could be a victim of fear or you could use your fear to have like tunnel vision, and for me, it was just like, like I don't want to lose. I just don't want to lose, and whether it's, in a golf event or in this or business or whatever it is, like but I don't want to lose. And when I say that, it's so funny because I got a buddy who I met out here in California who's like, he's like a big kid, right? He's probably 40, in his 40s or so. He's a little younger than me, but he's super competitive, right? And we're all, whenever he comes over, he always wants to play something with me and play against me and always do it, and I'm always beating him, right? And he's just like, you're so competitive, St. John. I'm like, here's the difference right now. I'm like, you're competing with me, but I'm not competing with you. I'm not trying to beat you. I'm just trying to be the best me. I'm like, that's what you need to learn. I'm like, just be the
Yes.
best you, and you may end up beating me. I'm like, but you're
Mhm.
trying so hard to beat me. You're not focused on yourself. And, that's one of the things that I've always tried to do is not play outside of myself, or not like, I've always tried to be better than I was yesterday type of idea, right?
Yes.
Especially when I'm playing something or doing something. It's like, okay, like how do I take that fear of not doing it and focus? But do you actually do it every time? No. Do you win
Right.
every time? No. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And I think fear is it's a four-letter word,
Yeah.
right? Fear is a four-letter word. And when you can use it, I think that's what we need to teach more and more people is fear is there. Let's just
Mhm.
recognize that. Fear
Mhm.
is there. Like it's okay. But how
Mhm.
are you going to use it? And I think I try to when I talk with people and work with people, I try to take fear and make it focus. Right? Because again, if you can lock in and you can get focused,
Right.
it's endless. It's endless.
Yeah. And to your point, when you were talking about, you're not competing against him, you're competing against the best version of yourself. We were talking about Djokovic, the tennis player. A lot of times people think they're focused on the outcome. and they're addicted to the process. So they're addicted to the next shot, or they're addicted to their preparation, and they're addicted to also having fun. If you focus on tennis players at high level, they have fun doing what they're doing, but they're not so much about winning the Grand Slam. Obviously, they want to win the Grand Slam. They don't want to lose the Grand Slam, but they also see excitement in the losing. And Kobe Bryant talked about this. Is he welcomed the losing, not intentionally, but if losing were to happen, he was going to. It gave him an opportunity to learn something about the next time. What can I learn from this? Because you're actually going to learn more from losing than winning.
Of course, of
And
course.
a lot of times people think we're competing against others, but when you're down on the mat in the morning and you're doing yoga and you're doing your push-ups, you're actually creating the mindset, and then the results actually have a way of showing up, and it's not accidental. They say that luck is the intersection between opportunity and preparation. So in other words, when someone's doing that there's going to be results that are going to come this way. And so I think that fear is just a part of the process. But instead of, one of the things that I wanted to say to the viewers out loud today so that it didn't get bigger was that I was scared. And there was a skater, I showed a video of her, and she said to her coach, "I'm frightened." And he goes, "Great, now you can have the skate of your life." And she won. But she admitted she was afraid, which it means the fear couldn't
Releases
get
it.
bigger. It
Yeah.
released it, and it made room for something else.
Yeah.
And so I think your extreme focus on your extreme events has allowed you to deal with the day to day as almost mundane fear compared to that. So you can deal with this fear. But
Mm-hmm.
the next thing, though, I want to talk to you about, because the folks are going to feel your confidence right now. But I want to maybe get into places of uncertainty with you.
Okay.
So the next level up for you, what scares you? Is there anything you're doing now that scares you? Do you feel sometimes imposter syndrome? And what do you plan to do with that?
Yeah, again, so I've recently found myself surrounded by, individuals out there who are what I would consider to be, and I think most would consider to be just playing on a different level, right? They're world leaders in their industry, and
Right.
they're dealing with world leaders, and they're making decisions that are going to impact global, not just
Mhm.
individual.
Right.
Um, and getting to talk and getting to um, to work with and start to learn from one individual in particular. I've just been really taken aback by him, because
Mhm.
the beauty of him is you could sit down next to him and you would have no idea who this individual was. He talks about like wanting to put on a flannel shirt and go fly fishing in Montana.
Right.
Like he's just a regular Joe who wants to enjoy himself. And it was funny because he confided in me when we were chatting, going back and forth, just really getting to know each other. And he's like, what's really interesting to me? And I'm like, what's that? He's like, I'm really lonely. I was like, well, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, he's like, because as he's entering into like his next level, and again, this guy
Yes.
he's playing at such a high level,
Yep.
and now he's finding himself around in the rooms with again these world leaders who are looking to him for advice, and he's kind of having that same thing that I'm having, looking at him, being like, am I in the right spot right now? Like, do I deserve to be here? Like, is this really happening? And he's like, I don't have anyone to talk to. He's like, I really don't have anyone to talk to under who can understand what it is I'm going through. And I'm like, I understand what you're going through. I'm like, because I'm having it right now talking to you. I'm like, I kind of feel like, at a different level, the same level that you're on. And you do kind of sit back in these moments, and again, like my immediate thought when I was talking to this guy, and what really got me was, he as we're having this conversation, we're probably like an hour and a half into it, and this was after we had Zoom calls together, and we had never met face to face, but we had this face to face meeting out here in California just 2 weeks ago. And it was like an hour and a half in. He's like, I want you in my inner circle. And he said it to me, and I'm like, what
Yeah.
do you wait? What? You want me in your inner circle? He's like, yeah. He's like, I don't know what's going to happen. And he's like, I don't know how we're going to work this out. He's like, but I want us to do stuff together. And he's like, I want you in my inner circle. And I immediately thought to myself, okay, here's this guy from a little town in Vermont, right, who's now out sitting here in Hollywood with him, going through having these conversations, talking about worldly things. And I'm like, do I even who am I right now?
Right.
And at that moment I kind of had that imposter syndrome feeling. And I was like, you know what, and I had to remind myself, I'm like, why, what attracts him? What has attracted me to him or him to me? And it was the fact that I looked at him, one, as just a normal human being when I was talking to him and giving him my advice. And I was treating him with that respect and not kind of like putting him on a pedestal, but
Right.
respecting him at the same time. And I say this to people all the time because, I found myself around people of influence and, stars and athletes and whoever it is. And I always tell people, I'm like, everyone puts their pants on the same exact
Same
way,
way.
one leg at a
Yeah.
time. Right. I'm like, and everyone has the same problems, no matter how successful they are. And it was funny too, when get off topic, but not off topic. When we came out to California, we moved to Malibu, which is, it's a really pretty spot. It's a really pretty area. Um, but what I noticed, of course, like we're surrounded by people of money and influence and go-getters. And I noticed a lot of unhappy people, right? A
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
unhappy, wealthy people. And it really dawned on me. And it was like, wow, here are these people who are super successful, but all they've done is chase money,
Right.
thinking it was going to bring them happiness. And guess
Mhm.
what? They ended up wealthy and miserable. So it was interesting. It's always interesting that you've got to, no matter what you're doing, again, we all want to feel secure. We all want to have our finances. But if you're doing it in a way that doesn't leave you filled, you're going to find it when you're there, you're more miserable than when you were broke. And it's
Right.
it's really it's a weird concept for people to be like, yeah, well, I'd rather not be broke, right? Because
Mhm.
hey, I've been there, done that too,
Right.
and so it's
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
fun. I get that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's really to find yourself in those situations of where your happiness is. But to go back, that imposter syndrome I felt and that hesitation I felt was again that kind of like fear and focus moment,
Hmm.
right? Where I was just like, all right, well, like, no, I deserve to be here because of the experiences
Right.
I've had and how I can help him grow in what he's looking to do right now. So yeah, so those moments definitely arise. I actually have those moments a lot too, still when I'm talking day to day with, different people for even Flip, because I get to talk to a lot of people of influence out there right now for Flip who want to, do some work with us. And I could either be taken aback by them or again just treat them with the respect of, hey, you put your pants on like I do. Like how can we link arms? How can we
Hmm.
do great things? And how can we
Right.
help people have their Flip My Life moments?
That's right. You talked about people are successful. That sometimes they say it's lonely at the top, or there's a perception of loneliness. But I think one of the things is if we talk about like the six human needs, right? And I won't go into the first four, but the final two, which are spiritual needs, there are four needs of the personality, and then there's two of the spirit. And one is contribution, giving greater to the greater good, something beyond yourself, and growing. If we're growing regularly, which will meet the other four human needs. So a lot of times the unhappiness is a disconnect, and there's also too much push in the person's life. So what I mean by that is we push, 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 but some things pull us. So if we're in a cause that we really like, it pulls us towards it. Sometimes we get tired of pushing because that's what we're doing all the time, but that might mean we're out of balance. So there's an opportunity there for somebody who has that many resources to give it the greater level to meet their needs for certainty, uncertainty, connection, and significance, which are the other four, which I won't get into. But um, so how do you how do you navigate? In other words, like so if you're sitting there with a little bit of this uncertainty, do you become aware of what your role will be with somebody like that? Does that give you the comfort that you need? Um, what is it
No,
that
no, I don't, I'm not aware with the role I'll actually take with him, but that's actually the comfort I do find because I find it challenging,
okay,
right? So the challenge that of me stepping up into whatever this role might be with him is what I find interesting, and then what gets me excited. And you mentioned the idea of push and pull. Like I feel like I've pushed for so long in my life,
yeah,
really just like head down, like like I got to get this, got to get this. And I feel like within the last couple of years, it's all switched for me, and it's literally become just like a magnet. Everything, I feel like everything is now flowing towards me versus me pushing, and it's been really interesting to notice the ease in it, right? Like everything is just easy. Like I find myself in this conversation with this guy, right? Like everything is just easy. I'm not, I'm not like raising my hand or running into it. Instead, I'm more of a walk and observe and take in, and then go. So I don't know if that's just because of age, right? Like I'm just mature now, if that's even what I would classify myself as. Um, but you know, I find again what gets me excited always is the unknown. That's what gets me excited, right? Like I don't necessarily want to know what the end is because I want to watch it unfold sometimes.
Okay, so
I
you're
want
okay. You're okay, Scott, with the mystery and the not knowing, because too much not
100%
knowing for some people would make them really nervous and they'd want certainty back, so they
nuts.
would derail it. So what is that allows you to trust yourself
Most people.
in the dark when you can't see? What allows you to trust?
Well, again, I think it goes back to what I was told as a kid, right? Like, can't's not in my dictionary. And if I was to believe in anything, believe in myself. So I always believe no matter what, I'm gonna get my way out of whatever I'm in. I'm gonna find my way to the end. And I think Laura actually teaches a really good lesson in this, and she calls it the trust bucket, right? And she's like, there's so many different ways to the goal
Yep.
that you can't focus on getting here because it could be this way, it could be this way, it could be this way. She's like, but what you have to do is trust that you're going to get to that goal, right? And she's got a great lesson, many lessons actually, on what she calls the trust bucket. And I think that's what I've kind of adapted into myself, is just to be like, I trust that I'm going to get there. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, as part of my trust, I'm like, I don't write anything in pen, right? I
Uh,
write it in pencil
You
because I'm
you
I'm able to erase it and keep
you
going.
you just read my mind. I was just going to ask you that because I watched that on the Lee Harris Energy podcast that you did, as you said, write with a pencil, and I wanted to
Yeah.
know more about that.
Yeah. So the idea again is if you write in a pencil, you can just erase it and adapt, right? When you write in pen, I mean you cross it out. But my idea was like when you write in pen, it's so certain, which is good, right? Certainty is always good. But I mean, I haven't been in many situations where I reached my end goal exactly the way I thought I was going to get there. So that was kind of my idea with write and pencil, because you might think your line is like this, but really it's going to be like this. It might be like that, right? But you'll get there, but you'll be surprised that you most likely aren't going to get there the way you thought. Like I never thought I was going to end up here in California, that's for sure.
Wow. Okay.
So write and
Okay.
pencil.
There's a question I have for people when they're spiraling or things are not certain and they are nervous. I ask them, what are you most certain about right now? And what that does, it takes out the analytical what if and it brings us grounded into the now.
Sure.
If I were to intuitively, if I were to ask you that question, or actually let me flip this and say, what would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail at it? And then we might be able to ask you, what are you most certain about right now if you should get hung up on that question? So what would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail at it?
I see that's a funny question for me because like I don't ever look at anything like I'm gonna fail. Like I don't that actually does not even come into my mind. Like
Okay, it's not even
so
there.
to no, it's not even there because to me it's like, well, if I really wanted to do it, I could do it. Again, like I don't know how I'll get there, but if I really wanted to, I could do that. Like so I don't think there's anything, and again, like I might fail at it as I'm doing it, but I'll get there. So I don't know if there's anything that sticks out in my mind that I would say, oh, I would do this because
Okay.
I know I wouldn't fail at it.
So
That,
so going back to that person we were talking about when you're in proximity to him, by
hmm
the way, I have a saying, proximity is power, because if you're around three trainers and you're out of shape, you're going to be the fourth person in shape.
There you go.
Um,
Yep.
if you're around billionaires, there's a good chance you might become the next one because proximity is power. So, and then when you were talking about that guy, I was noticing it sounded like he had a lot of humility in him. And I bet he doesn't think he's special. And the reason I say that is a lot of times with radical genius or with genius, there's radical humility where they don't even know what they're doing as being great because they're
hmm
just doing what they love and they're in that. So I think that I would imagine being around him is also disarming in a way.
Well, I mean, I think actually, I mean, being around him, what I noticed for me was I saw a lot of similarities, right? Which actually gave me like,
Comfort.
oh, I can actually get to that level, right?
Oh,
Instead of being like, oh, can I get there? Can I get it? Like, could I ever achieve that much? Like
okay.
that, could I ever really achieve that much? And then being around him, I realized he's really no freaking different than me. I was like, holy
So
shit, like
so
we
you
had
so
such similarities.
so here's a great strategy then. What we might notice about you when you're uncertain is part of your subconscious strategy might be to look for the similarity. And that might be one of the anchors that you step into. So because I'm big into strategy and to noticing strategy. And success leaves clues, right? So I wonder if at times where you find that sameness, that certainty, does that allow you to navigate a little bit more of the unknown?
Yeah, probably. Probably. I could see where that plays into a role of it for sure. And because it was almost instantaneous for the two of us, right? Even just having conversations like we're having right now, as we started out with Zoom calls, we were both like, whoa, like what is this right here?
What are we
Like
gonna do?
what is like, yeah, what is this feeling that we're both having? Why is it like,
Right.
what is the magnet right now?
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's an actual really observant point that you just brought up, and I actually appreciate that.
No,
Something else to make me think
well,
about that.
well, what I do is I love to pay attention. And,
Hmm.
and in paying attention, it creates the bond even further. In other words, there's a synergy. So what I've
Sure.
noticed in the last few minutes, there's an energy that's picked up a bit. And
Hmm.
we're now, I feel like we're playing off of it, which allows me to kind of go with you even more and sense
Sure.
what you're about even deeper. And I think that when you have two people like that, you mentioned a magnet, there's a lot that can happen off of it. So, like for example, here's the paper, right? I just threw it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, is that now I know that I don't need the paper
Yeah.
because this is where we go. And I also wanted to ask you about your partner in crime,
Okay.
because we talked about a little bit of differences in the way the two of you operate. And I think
Yeah.
for Laura, she's the vibrant colors of the rainbow, which might be all out here. And then you're what? You're the black and white that brings it back
I
in.
Yeah, I am the black and white. I'm the straight and arrow, and she's like the every color of rainbow and circles all over the place, right? Which is actually what makes us, such a great bond, and makes because I'm able to help her kind of I call her like big idea girl, right? Like she's got all these ideas. They're incredible. They go from A to Z like that, and I'm able to help kind of like what we call it. We actually do this. We learned it from our dog trainer focus. So when I see Laura's like brain going,
Oh, and out here, and
I'm
you
like,
bring it back in here.
focus, Laura, focus. What are the things that we got to do? Like, what do you need to do now to get these to there? And then for me, she like kind of makes me think a little farther outside my box, right? Instead of being so like one dimensional like this all the time. She's like, yeah, but what if, what if, what if? And so it's been a really interesting partnership in that way, where it's allowed us to, both grow and feed off of the pieces that we needed to fill in for each other, right?
Okay.
And for me, like when I first met her, she was 18 years old and she was fragile at that point. Coming off of just a really weird high school kind of abusive relationship and just fragile. And I really brought like out of her strength and like confidence back to where she's now like, she's unstoppable at this point. Like but again, it's been now almost 30 something years. Um, but we've been really fortunate to experience a lot together. When we crossed over a couple years back in our excuse me in our lives where we had been together longer than we had been apart in our lives, we were both like, all right, this is kind of like entering into a completely different realm right now. The fact that we've spent our more of our lives together than we have apart, um, it was just a really weird concept to take in. The one that we had, that we're now getting to that age, and then two, the fact that we've spent more of our lives together than apart. Um, it's really incredible, and we've been very fortunate, to we have an analogy that I love to tell people because they're like, how do you spend 30 something years together and go through? I mean, we were just kids when we met, and one thing was we had this picture one day we saw when we were young. There was this picture of a field with two tire tracks going through the field, right? Like the road. And it was just tire tracks where you had the grass in between the tire tracks, but it was two tire tracks. And we were like, that's us. We're like, here we are. We're on our own individual paths, but we're on the same trajectory going together. But like, I can't like really affect her path because she's got her path. I've got my path. So we're doing it individually, but we're doing it together. If that makes sense. Right. And that's really allowed us to kind of grow as individuals, but still come together as a team.
Beautiful. I love what you're saying because I talk about the I and the we, because even in a couple's relationship, there is a we, but there still needs to be individual expression.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but also too is understanding the environment of the relationship. So for example, synergy. So if you're both bringing in something wonderful, you got this synergy which can amplify things. But if things are not going well, that can amplify things in another direction.
100%.
So how do you folks handle conflict? How do you work through that?
I mean, I think through conflict, we've done multiple pieces when it comes to it. Obviously talking it out is probably the single most important piece, as hard as it can be. Um, we're not like arguers, yeller type of people, which is really fortunate. Like we don't raise our voices really to each other. Um, but we have our moments where we literally just walk away. We're just like, all right, like we're gonna take a time out here, right? Walk away. We'll come
Yeah.
back.
Mhm.
When I recognize that probably more than her, if when I've had those moments where I'm just like my blood boils and I'm just like I gotta walk away before I say something stupid. Before I'm like To, I'm out of here. I'll go smoke a cigar or like something like that. Like just take your time. I think because most we're so quick to overreact and we're so quick to be like, but no, you're wrong. That you learn over time to like take it down a notch, reflect maybe a little bit longer, and just like walk away for a second and come back on a cooler time. But again, like it's not always like I tell people, I'm like, after 30 something years together, like it's not always rainbows. We've had our
Of
moments
course.
where we're like, is this gonna work? Is that gonna work? Are we in this together? And for when you're dealing with relationships, what we have always found that has always been our bind was our end kind of vision, which was us, in our 90s, whatever it is, holding hands on a porch watching the sunset in rocking chairs. That was kind of like that's been our vision from the get-go. And whenever we've, veered away from each other, that's been always the thing to be like, yeah, but what about our vision? What
Right.
about our vision? And that's always been the kind of the
Right.
glue that's brought it all back.
That's right. So it's like if you're gonna one day be old and feed the pigeons, if that's the
Yeah,
goal, then
exactly.
when you get off track, you have to remember the vision of that
Yeah, the bigger goal.
and then the bigger goal, and then how you also want to help humanity. And what would you if we talk about legacy, what would you be what would you want to be remembered for, Scott?
Um, I think from what I've already been known to do for people, and that's to get them to believe they can. Right.
Right.
I've been very fortunate to receive, you know, thousands upon thousands of messages from people over my career being like, thank you because of what you've said or how you did this. I've been able to do X, Y, and Z. Like I've stepped out of this, I've stepped into that, I've done this. It's been so I want to if I was to believe what people might say about me when I'm gone would be because of him I did.
Because of him, I did.
Yeah.
Okay, so you help people to find their inner greatness. You help them to tap back and connect with that because I
Yeah,
believe
just
people talk about losing confidence. I said, and you didn't lose it, you just disconnected from it, and you're just
yeah.
mirroring back for people how special they are, and that's just a great gift that you bring to the world. And I want to thank you being a part of my experience. And there was a vulnerability I had with this experience, although I did feel strong coming into it, but there was a part of me that felt a little naked and a little bit afraid. So I want to thank you for joining with me and joining the energy
Always.
and being part of my first. And I'm 57 years old, so it's hard to find firsts at this point.
I hear
But
you, brother. I
I
hear
really
you.
appreciate for being a part of my process, and I thank you for what you brought to the table today.
Well, like I said, it was an absolute honor to be the first one on here with you. We've just briefly gotten to know each other within the last few months, and I really appreciate all that you're putting out to the world. And you are definitely one of those beacons there. So thank you for what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you so much, folks. And Will Cook reporting from Mount Kisco, New York. Tune in next time. I'll see you on the mountain.